Okay, you guys, today what you need for a bio health class is you need a piece of paper and something to write with. You can use computer paper. It really doesn't matter as long as you're able to take the notes for class, and then once you're completed with the notes, you'll take a picture and upload that picture to your health Google file folder, and I can take the grade from there. So I'd like this to be labeled neuron. Neuron is another name for a brain cell. Okay. You have about 100 billion of the brain cells in your body. And I want to show you some images to help give context to this lesson. So let's go here. Let's look first at the brain. Let's look at the exterior view. Okay, this is a picture of your brain and you're looking straight at someone. So these yellow sides are the frontal lobe. Okay, you have the left brain and you have the right brain as well. You have the temporal lobes. Here's your brainstem. There's your cerebellum. Let's take a side profile look. You see the parietal lobe now, the occipital lobe, a side profile of the cerebellum. We go all the way to the back. We see the two hemispheres now completely distinct. We took a quiz a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago, on if you're more of a left-brained or right-brain dominant person. So you can see the two hemispheres here, the two sides of the cerebellum as well. Okay, human brain. This is what it would look like if you were to do a surgery on it. Neurons are gray and they're surrounded in white fat. So they look pink because of the blood, but the actual color of millions of neurons together would be gray. Okay, and then this gray tissue and white tissue that looks pink is made up of millions of nerve cells. And I know this is a computer image, but I like that it shows you just the density of the amount of neurons in the brain. So we're going to zoom in today on one neuron because it's important to know about the anatomy. All right, one more thing about neurons is that they never touch each other. I like this image. Is this one the same? There we go. That's even better. They never touch each other. They are electrical wires. They can't touch, so they communicate with each other via chemicals. So you always have a little bit of space between brain cells, and they communicate with each other by sending signals via neurotransmitter back and forth. In the depression unit, we talked about one type of neurotransmitter that makes you feel happy about life is serotonin. So that's one of the neurotransmitters we will discuss. Okay, back to the notes. Okay, so let's just start with a single brain cell and we'll draw them connected in our next class. So let's go down here a little bit. Let's leave some space up here for some arrows. Okay, the top or the left side of it is going to be somewhat star-shaped, and I'll explain why. Then you have a very long section. And then you have the end of your neuron. All right. Going to try to give you a second to get caught up. And then every single cell has a nucleus. Okay, let's go ahead and begin by labeling some of the essential parts. And I'll try to use the same color as I highlight with. All right, let's start with the nucleus. This is a cell, so it's going to have a nucleus and all of the DNA that every single other cell has. So this is the nucleus. And the main genes in the nucleus that are turned on are the genes that code for the neurotransmitters, such as serotonin and dopamine. So they have specific genes turned on. And if you're in my bio class, you know this. And if not, you'll learn it in a few days, that every cell in your body is different in a few ways. Its size, what it does, and what genes are turned on. In the nucleus of a neuron, you will have the genes that code for neurotransmitters. So the nucleus produces the genetic code to make neurotransmitters. All right, I'll go ahead and pause for a second so you can take the notes. All right, the next part of the neuron is something called the soma. The soma has extensions off of it called dendrites. This is soma. We also call it the cytoplasm, and we also call it the cell body. All right. So this right here, I will label it in pink because I colored it in pink. This general region has 3 names. It's called the soma, the cell body, and the cytoplasm. And all this does, it contains the neurons, organelles. So it's going to have, for example, it's going to have a mitochondria because it's going to need a lot of ATP from glucose. It's going to have ribosomes. It's going to have the rough and smooth ER. It's going to have a Golgi, etc. Okay, so it is the cytoplasm of a neuron. Okay. Let me see if I can get a better image for dendrites because this star shape does not do it justice. Okay, there we go. That dark green right there, that is a cell body. And look at all those web-like extensions that are branching off of that neuron. All right, there are some more dendrites. Let me see. Yeah, there's some better dendrites right there. So I just made it into a simplified star, but if you guys can see, it's extremely webbed. Some neurons can make up to 10,000 connections with other cells. So these extensions that branch off of the soma are called dendrites, and they are comparable to an antenna. They are something that's going to receive the signal from the neighboring neuron. So there's a neuron over here that doesn't touch it, that's sending the signal. This dendrite right here is where it receives the signal. So this is a dendrite. And I'm going to put up here, it's comparable to an antenna, which means it is the signal receiving site on the neuron. Okay, so I actually will, just to give this more context, I'm going to sketch the end of another neuron over here. So this would be like the axon terminal of the sending neuron, like that. Okay, this would be like the axon that we'll talk about in a second. Here are the dendrites of the sending neuron, like that. So this would be your sending neuron. This right here will be your receiving neuron. Okay, so it's going to send messages using neurotransmitters. So I will use maybe orange for that. They're traveling at such a high velocity, they're not going to spill out this side. I believe it's like 100 meters per second. That sounds like an exaggeration, but it's extremely fast. The pace at which it's traveling from the sending neuron tip to this signal, the neuron receiving dendrite. So that right there is neurotransmitter. And the neurotransmitters attach themselves to these little receptor cups on the edges of the dendrite. So I'm just going to make these little receptor cups. And they're specific to the shape of the neurotransmitter that they're meant to catch. And think of them like a baseball glove. All right, so the neurotransmitters are released from the sending neuron and are attached to receptors on the dendrites, which are basically the antenna that branch off of the soma. Okay, so once they connect to the dendrites, it causes this neuron to turn on. And the electricity then that causes this neuron to turn on is activated. Okay, so the electrical signal is now going to be turned on, just like turning on a light switch. And that is going to cause electricity to travel down this long part of the neuron called an axon. Okay, and this is just going to transmit the signal. Transmit, and I'm going to continue down here. Electrical neuron signal. Okay. You have some axons in your body that are 1 meter long, the ones that connect your spinal cord to your fingertips. But you have some that are incredibly short and microscopic. So they vary greatly in length, and they get their length from the axons. So they're going to conduct electricity. And anything that conducts electricity has to be insulated. For example, if I can pull this wire in over here, this is an electrical wire. Okay, there is electricity running on that wire. This plastic is padding that surrounds the wire, and it keeps the electrons and the electricity flowing. In the same way, an axon is covered in fat, and the fat makes sure that the electricity that is sending the signal stays on the axon and doesn't leak out. All right, so this right here is called the myelin sheath. It's also called myelination. It's also called a Schwann cell. I know that's confusing, but basically what is this? It's simple. It is fat. And what it does is it surrounds and insulates the neuron. The neurons will make it possessive, axon, to keep the electrical signal flowing. Certain drugs, you guys, break down the myelin on your axons. Therefore, the person that is using those drugs heavily are literally slower people. They can't process information as fast because they have little holes and links. If you can see up here in the upper left-hand corner, there's holes in their insulation on their, for lack of better terms, their brain wiring. So they're not as fast. That takes a lot of drug use, and usually the drugs that do that are things called inhalants, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. Those are things that someone would put in a brown paper bag and huff, like an aerosol can or a Sharpie or things like that they would get high from a fume. Those things go straight to your brain and break down your myelin, and they break down your ability to send your signal because you have leaks in your fatty insulation. Okay, we are almost done. We have the end of this neuron called the axon terminal. And the axon terminal is responsible for releasing neurotransmitter like it did right here. So I'm going to label that right here. This is also an axon terminal. Terminal is the end of something, like the terminal at the airport ends. It's like the end of the hallway, the end of the runway, the terminal. This is the axon terminal. And its job is to release neurotransmitter into the synapse. What is a synapse, you might be asking? Synapse is easy. It's just the space between neurons, because I told you guys they don't touch. So that gap between them is a synapse. So I'm just going to put that right here. It's the gap between B/W neurons. All right, last thing. I'm going to label the synapse over here. Right there. That is just another image of a synapse. Okay, that is a neuron, a brain cell in a nutshell. I want you guys now, using your notes, to complete the provided post-test 4 points. So go slow and take your time. Hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for watching.